Today we're going to be deriving the sum and difference formulas for trigonometry. We're going to think of this as the unit circle. So right here we have 0 degrees, then 60 degrees, 130 degrees, and 190 degrees. Now we're going to think of the arcs. So the arc going from 0 to 130 is 130 degree arc. And then we're going to start from 60 degrees. And from 60 degrees all the way to 190, if we calculate that, if we take 190 minus 60, that also is a 130 degree arc. So basically, the two arcs are the same. The blue arc is 130 degrees, and the red arc was 130 degrees. Now, in geometry, if the two arcs are equal, you have what's called the chords. So we're going to consider this the red chord right here. And the red chord is going to be equal in length to the blue chord. The blue chord will be here, because in geometry it said if the intercepted arcs are the same, then the chords are going to be the same length. So the red chord is equal to the blue chord. And that's kind of the basis of what we need to do next. So we're going to bring in a similar circle that we had before. Okay, I'll draw a line right here. And again, this is considered a unit circle. Let me give myself just a tad bit more room here. All right, so if that's a unit circle, then this set of coordinates here is going to be 1, 0. Okay, and we consider this point right here as the cosine of A, comma, sine A. And the point over here is going to be considered cosine B, comma, sine B. Now, this point right here can be considered in terms of cosine A and B as the cosine of A minus B and the sine of A minus B, because it's in between those 2 points. Now, we can also consider this point here to be, remember cosine is really x, so this is x sub 1, y sub 1, and this will be x sub 2, y sub 2. And then we also have to do it again. So over here, this point will be considered x sub 1, y sub 1, and then we'll have x sub, let's see, I blew that. Sorry about that. That's going to be x sub 1, y sub 1 here. And over here, we're going to have x sub 2, y sub 2. Now in geometry, maybe you remember what's called the distance formula. The distance is equal to the square root of x sub 1 minus x sub 2 squared plus y sub 1 minus y sub 2 squared. Now if we solve for d, if we square both sides, which I'm going to do, if I square both sides, then I get d squared is equal to x sub 1 minus x sub 2 squared plus y sub 1 minus y sub 2 squared. And now we're going to continue. Instead of x's and y's, we're going to have cosines. So now what we have is we have, let's get the right colors here. We have cosine. Actually, I'm going to start up here. So we're going to have the cosine of a minus b. The cosine of a minus b minus 1. Okay, minus 1. Let's get the colors I want here. And that's going to be squared. Okay. And then plus, and then we have the sine of a minus b. The sine of a minus b Okay, technically minus 0. Minus 0. Get the colors I want here. Okay, and all that's going to be squared. Okay, that's going to equal. Okay, so that represents basically, like we talked about before, this chord over here. That represents the length of that chord. And now we're going to represent the length of the other chord, which is going this way. Okay, so that can be represented, its length, by the cosine of A minus the cosine of B. Okay, so let's get that. That's the cosine of A minus the cosine of B. Let's get the green there, cosine of B. Okay, and of course that's going to be squared. And then plus the sine of A minus the sine of B. Okay, so we got the sine of A minus the sine of B. Minus the sine of B. And that's going to be squared as well. Okay, so basically we have to use FOIL in a whole bunch of places. All right, we got to FOIL this, we got to FOIL that, we got to FOIL this one. Actually not, because it's minus 0, and we'll FOIL that. Okay, so to make life a little bit easier, let me get rid of that. Basically I have to bring in this guy right here. Okay, so we'll bring in this guy, and that's basically everything foiled. Okay, that's what it turns out to be. All right, so from there, we're going to notice some things. Okay, if I encapsulate cosine squared of A minus B right here, okay, and sine squared of A minus B, all right, if I add those two together, that's going to equal 1. Okay, so you're going to see what I do in a second. And then over here, I've got cosine squared A right here. And then cosine squared A and cosine squared B is right here. Okay. And we know that that equals 1 as well. Okay. So we got some other things going on here. If we also notice that we have, let's see here. Okay, so I blew that. I gotta erase that right there. I was supposed to encapsulate sine squared A, cosine plus sine squared. Okay, so I got that one. All right. And then over here, I have a cosine squared B and a sine squared B. So everything in green equals 1, everything in red equals 1, everything in blue equals 1. Okay. So what am I left with here? I'm left with a negative 2 cosine of A minus B. Okay. And notice I already have a plus 1 right here. I have a plus 1 right here, plus the encapsulated green. That's actually going to give me a plus 2. So that's plus 2. And that's going to equal, okay, a negative 2 cosine A cosine B. Okay, and then minus 2 sine A sine B. All right, and then I have another plus 2, because everything in red is 1, everything in blue is 1, so that's plus 2 right here. Okay, so basically at this point, this 2 can cancel out with that 2. Okay, and I can factor out a 2 on the left side. So now what am I left with? I'm left with negative 2 cosine of A minus B is equal to, all right, if I factor out a negative 2 over here, I've got negative 2 times cosine A cosine B, cosine A cosine B, plus sine A sine B. Okay? So basically what's going to happen is this 2 is going to cancel with that 2. Okay? So now I'm left with the cosine of A minus B. The cosine of A minus B is equal to cosine A. Let me make it green here. Cosine A cosine B plus sine A sine B. Okay, and that's your first what we call sum and difference formula. That'd actually be a difference formula because you're subtracting. Okay, and from there, of course, we want to be able to find the cosine of A plus B. That's what we're going to do next. Well, if you think about it, that's actually the same thing as the cosine of A minus a negative B. Those would be the same thing. Okay? So basically, that's going to equal cosine A and then cosine negative B. So we're just inserting a negative B where there used to be a positive B. Okay? And then that'll be plus sine A and then sine negative B. Okay? Now, basically at this point, we have the cosine of A plus B because a negative becomes a positive. All right, so that still remains over here. That's cosine A. Now remember, cosine negative B is the same as cosine B. Okay, that's one of your even odd identities. Okay, but that's really a sine negative B. Okay, really is really equal to negative. So you put the negative there, and then you're going to have sine A, sine B. Okay, and again, where did that come from? Basically, the sine negative B is the same thing as negative sine B. So we just kind of put it there. All right, so there's another formula for us, and the others will be derived later.